All characters in the story are over the age of 18. My daughter is a gymnast. My wife, Molly, was always in a hurry. She did everything she did to the fullest. Molly appeared in this world early, about 6 weeks ahead of her due date. She didn't even wait for her father to take her mother to the hospital. She was born on the side of the Pacific Highway. In all the characters in the story are over 18 years old. My daughter is a gymnast. My wife, Molly, was always in a hurry. Everything she did to the fullest. Molly appeared in this world early, about 6 weeks ahead of her due date. She didn't even wait for her father to take her mother to the hospital. She was born on the side of the Pacific Highway in Brisbane, Australia. Her parents didn't have enough time to go to the Princess Alexandra Hospital. She walked early and talked early. Molly went to school early. By the time she finished her final year of high school, she was almost 2 full years younger than her classmates. Molly got her driver's license on her first attempt on her 17th birthday. Her first car was a 30-year-old vehicle. Molly, a rising star on the rally scene, hails from Brisbane, Australia. Despite her young age, she displayed a mature attitude, opting to settle down and start a family rather than pursuing a career. This decision was influenced by her upbringing, where she was the only girl and the youngest child in a family of 4. Molly's dedication to her education was evident from an early age. She began school a year before her peers, and by the time she completed her final year of high school, she was almost 2 years younger than her classmates. Her commitment to driving was evident from the first time she took the wheel, and she obtained her driver's license on her 17th birthday. Her first car, a 30-year-old Ford Sport, was in poor condition when she purchased it. It had a blown engine and was a real wreck. However, this did not deter her from taking on the task of repairing it. She spent her evenings and weekends, often pestering, intimidating, and helping her 3 older brothers and father, disassembling the car to the body and repairing or replacing rusty or damaged parts. The financial resources she used to purchase the necessary spare parts are a mystery to me, given her family's financial constraints and her university expenses. However, she managed to repaint the car a light shade. Molly, a 17-year-old Ford Sport, purchased a dilapidated car with a faulty engine. She dedicated herself to the restoration of the vehicle, working tirelessly with her family to repair the engine, disassemble the car, and replace or repair rusty or damaged parts. The financial resources for acquiring spare parts remained a mystery to her, given her family's limited financial means and her own university expenses. Once the car was restored, Molly painted it green with black racing stripes and began participating in local rally competitions, consistently achieving commendable results and garnering recognition in local newspapers and magazines as a rising star in the rally scene. A local car company extended an offer of sponsorship, but Molly declined, citing her desire to focus on her education and personal life. She had always envisioned a future with marriage, settling down, and starting a family of her own, and she felt that her current lifestyle, as the only girl and the youngest child in a family of 4, was a suitable foundation for this future. Molly is a skilled racing driver with black racing stripes on her car. She has achieved notable success in local rally competitions and has appeared frequently in local newspapers and magazines as a rising star in the rally scene. A local car company offered her a sponsored ride, but she declined, citing her desire to settle down and have children. She preferred her current role as the only girl and the youngest child in her family. That's where I came in. I'm her husband, Paul. I'm a year older than Molly, and we lived across the street from each other. My brother Matt and I have been in the same class all through high school and are best friends. When I was growing up, I spent a lot of time at the Spencer house. My father abandoned my mother when I was still a child, and she never coped when I was a teenager. My mom was a heavy drinker. I've heard that some people are good drinkers. Molly exhibited a tendency to become verbally and physically abusive when stressed. She frequently consumed alcohol, and her parents, Pat and Valerie, along with her brothers Fred, James, Matt, and Molly, treated me as a brother, even allowing me to sleep on the couch when her mother had consumed excess alcohol. Molly rarely spoke to me directly, but she frequently looked in my direction, even when she was only 6 or 7 years old. I would occasionally turn away from my activities with Matt and find her sitting on something, kicking her heels, and observing her was essentially the only occasion on which I observed her motionless. For the remainder of the time, she was engaged in activities such as kicking, riding, disassembling electrical or mechanical components, or working on electrical or mechanical systems. Molly completed part of 5th grade with Matt and me. At her insistence, she was transferred to a higher grade, and by the middle of the year, she was already far ahead of us. She never spoke to me in class, but she was seated 2 tables across from me, and I often noticed that I observed her infrequently, but when I did, she was invariably looking in my direction. Molly advanced to the next grade level, and I was uncertain whether I preferred it or not. She no longer sat near me. On the morning of her 18th birthday, Molly arrived and found Matt and me waiting for the next class. I was only 19, and I was in my first year of teaching. Matt enrolled in a mechanical fitter course at the same Institute of Technical and Further Education where I studied. Let me be alone for a while. Matt informed him that a conversation with Paul was necessary. Molly had a temper, and all the brothers were afraid of her. My wife, Tiny, is 5 feet 4 inches and 99 pounds, 45 kilograms. All the boys were the same height as me, over 6 foot tall, and over 185 pounds, 85 kilograms. Molly had no qualms about using punches below the belt to equalize her rival as soon as Matt was out of earshot. Molly turned to me and said, "Dad says I won't be able to get married before my birthday, so you're going to take. I will be unavailable this evening, therefore, I kindly request that you marry me. I am interested in conceiving a child, and my father must consent." Based on my observations, I had not realized that she held me in high regard. After spending considerable time with the Spencers, I came to understand that Molly was unyielding and would not accept a refusal, regardless of my attempts to evade or avoid addressing the matter directly. No amount of evasion could save me. I was on the verge of marrying Molly, likely within approximately 6 weeks when the pregnancy was confirmed. The Spencers owned a 3, Matt and Molly shared a bedroom. Pat built an additional room onto the back porch. Fred was relocated to that area. Matt was moved into Fred's former apartment, and Molly was allotted a separate room. "Please ensure you are staying with us this evening. I will come and pick you up around 1 o'clock, midnight in the morning, and you can get me pregnant," Matt muttered. Good, I mumbled. "I don't have a girlfriend, and I don't have much experience. I even got to second base with Helen one afternoon, but her mom came home before we could do more." "What did Molly want?" Matt asked after Molly left. "Nothing," I replied. "I didn't tell my best friend that his sister wanted me to get her pregnant. There must have been something." Matt said, "Molly never does anything without a reason." "What did she tell you?" "I don't know. She asked if He expressed his desire to be her boyfriend." "What are your thoughts on the matter?" Matt inquired, his tone laced with mirth. "It would be advisable for you to consider marrying her. This would solidify our relationship, making us true brothers. At present, we are merely distant relatives." "I may indeed do so," I responded, my voice tinged with contemplation. "Molly is my sister, and I have deep affection for her. However, she resides in a distant location, which makes it challenging to maintain a close relationship with her. She's out there somewhere, and only a madman would marry her. I know you're not that crazy. Let's just leave it at that, okay?" Matt looked at me for a while. "You're thinking about yourself. You can date her, Paul, but I still think you're crazy. If Dad or my brothers catch you with her, they'll. You're aware that if you pursue a romantic relationship with her, it could have negative consequences for you. I understand that you're not the only one who might be considering this option. Matt, you've been thinking about this for some time." You're welcome to pursue a relationship with her, but I have to advise you to be cautious. If your family members become aware of this relationship, it could have adverse consequences for you. What if Molly wants this, Matt? What should I do then? If that's what Molly wants, you can go and ask Dad if you can marry her now because you made a mistake. I think I made a mistake. I muttered, looking over my shoulder. Can I come to your place tonight? Anytime, my friend. I receive a modest amount of financial assistance from the government to cover the costs of my studies, which amount to just over $250 per week. I allocated a portion of this budget to purchasing fried ribs and vegetables for Mrs. Spencer to prepare for us. Pat maintains a steady position at the local council, though the remuneration is modest. Therefore, I contribute a portion of my salary to support them. Neither Pat nor Val receives cash compensation, so I allocate a portion of my funds to purchasing food and personal hygiene products. I recently purchased a bottle of Britney Spears perfume for Mrs. Spencer, recognizing her affinity for the brand but acknowledging that it was beyond her budget. This purchase was made without significant deliberation on my part, I simply left. I decided to leave it in the bathroom. I didn't go home after class because I knew there would be someone waiting for me. I anticipated an aggressive reaction from the Spencers. However, only Molly was home. She behaved the same way she did every time I came. She didn't talk much. I entered the bathroom, and there was no one home. I knew that someone would be waiting for me at the Spencers. Only Molly was home. She behaved the same way she did every time I came. She didn't talk much. She let me in, and then she went back to studying. At another time, I asked her what she was studying. Her response was nothing really. I'm just waiting for the right moment suitable for what I cast, but all she did was smile. Val's car pulled into the driveway. Molly gathered her things from the table and went to her room. When she was almost out of the door, she turned around and said, "Don't fall asleep tonight. I don't want to wake you up." Mrs. Spencer was shopping, so I helped her carry the bags. She saw the things I bought lying on the bench by the sink, fried ribs and fried vegetables for dinner would be ideal. Belle embraced me, expressing her gratitude for my assistance. She acknowledged my positive qualities and the impact of Molly's influence on my perspective. I felt a mixture of anticipation and apprehension regarding the potential outcomes of the evening. The question of how to conceive a child is a complex one, though I possess a fundamental understanding of the theoretical aspects. However, I lack practical experience in this domain. I navigated the next 9 hours, preparing for my encounter with Molly. I traversed a multifaceted and ever-evolving landscape of emotions and feelings. The primary motivations were fear and excitement. I feared that a misstep would occur, that we would be discovered, and that I would forfeit my desired position in their home. I suspected that Molly was misleading me, and that her actions were part of a larger plan. Mrs. Spencer inquired, "Could you get the butter from the fridge?" Fortunately, James emerged from the bathroom and seized him. It was a working day in the morning, so we all retired early in the evening. I remained awake, anticipating and awaiting Molly's arrival and subsequent escort to her bed. Molly approached quietly. She approached the area where I was positioned and requested that I accompany her. I rose to my feet and, with a swift movement, placed my feet on the floor. Molly proceeded to place pillows on the couch and draped bedclothes over them in the dimness. To an external observer, it might have appeared as though I was still in a state of repose. I followed Molly into her room, my heart pounding with anticipation. She closed the door and placed a towel along the bottom. The room was filled with soft, gentle light. I was wearing a long robe tightly tied at the waist, boxers, and an old t-shirt. Molly and I stood and looked at each other. I was overwhelmed with uncertainty, unsure of how to proceed. Should I have initiated a conversation regarding the potential exploration of a romantic relationship? "Paul, would you like to engage in an intimate encounter with me?" I felt a sense of embarrassment and lowered my gaze. I'm sorry, Molly. I'm just about to go home. I apologize for my behavior. Please tell me you find me attractive, Paul. Shirt, Molly and I stood and looked at each other. I was uncertain how to proceed. Should I have initiated physical contact? Was it necessary to request permission? Paul, would you like to engage in an intimate encounter with me? I inquired, feeling a sense of embarrassment. I dropped Molly on the floor and turned away. I was on my way home. I felt a sense of shame. I apologize, Molly. I'm sorry, I said, blushing and almost in tears. Tell me you think I'm beautiful, Paul. Molly, you're not attractive. You're the most beautiful creature I have ever seen. Raphael's painting has nothing to do with you, he said. Molly, I want you to have sex with me, Paul. Please. I don't know how. I almost cried. We'll figure this out together, darling. There wasn't a single. I shook my head in disapproval. Miss Molly, you're not pretty. You are the most beautiful creature I have ever seen. Raphael's painting has nothing to do with you. Molly smiled broadly. Paul, please. I do not know how. I almost cried. We'll figure this out together, darling. There wasn't a single place or anyone else in the world where I wanted to be at that moment. What do you think we should name our first son? Paul asked Molly. I smiled. I knew Molly well enough to know that she had already chosen the names of our future children. I've always liked Albuquerque. I joked, choosing the strangest name that came to mind. What would you suggest as a name for our first son? Paul asked. I'm thinking of naming him after Albuquerque, I replied, attempting to lighten the mood. I've always liked Albuquerque, I continued. It's a unique choice, especially on a whim. I'm serious, Paul, Molly interjected. What do you think we should call him? Do you think it's possible that it could be a girl? I'm going to have 3 boys and then a girl, I replied. Molly, you're making me think, Paul interjected. Molly, I'm serious, Paul. What do you think we should call him? Do you think it's going to be a girl? I asked because I'm going to have 3 boys and then a girl. Molly told me as if the matter had already been decided, boys first because they need the most work in their youth and least of all in their old age, then a girl because you're going to need someone to look after you after I'm gone. She added in what turned out to be a frighteningly prophetic statement that night, we made love 3 more times around 5 o'clock in the morning. Molly roused me and guided me back onto the couch, just as her father entered the room. I was unable to sleep, so when Pat got up, I stood and made us a cup of tea. Sitting across from him at the table, I waited until he finished his first cup and made him another one before telling him, Mr. Spencer, I need your permission to marry Molly. Molly woke me up by pushing me back onto the couch. Just as she did, her father came in to start his workday. I couldn't sleep, so when Pat got up, I got off the couch and made us a cup of tea. Sitting across from him at the table, I waited until he finished his first cup and made him another one before telling him, Mr. Spencer, please. I need your permission to marry Molly. Pat stared at me for a while before saying, I bless you both. Paul, how would you feel if I asked her to marry me? I took a chance. I got an even flatter look. Pat is a good guy, but he is huge and runs his house with a firm and fair hand. However, Molly wrapped it around her little finger. What does my daughter say about this? Does she know that you want to date her? It was her idea. I admitted. Pat gave me a long look before saying, I bless you both. Paul, how would you feel if I asked her to marry me? I took a chance. I got an even flatter look. Pat is a good guy, but he is huge and runs his house with a firm and fair hand. However, Molly has a strong influence over him. Does my daughter know that you want to date her? It was her idea. I admitted. This morning, she came up to me and said that we were dating and that she was my girlfriend, but first, I wanted to get your permission. I added this little lie to protect my head from falling off my shoulders. Pat smiled happily. It looks like my Molly, he said. You do realize that we're going to have another conversation in a couple of years, don't you? Only this time, it won't be a date. This morning, she informed me that we were a couple and that she was my girlfriend, but that I should first obtain your permission. I added this little lie to protect my head from falling off my shoulders. Pat smiled happily. It looks like my Molly, he said. You do realize that we're going to have another conversation in a couple of years, don't you? This time it won't be a date. It will be getting married. I knew this would happen sooner, but I didn't say a word. I think you're right, I replied. Pat is what I replied. Pat went to work. I was sitting at the kitchen table while the house was waking up around me, and I was making tea or coffee for those who wanted it. Fred and James took toasts and quickly drank a cup of tea, heading to their courses at the university. Matt sat and I was aware that the marriage would be taking place soon, but I refrained from commenting. I believe you are correct, Pat. Pat was at work. I was sitting at the kitchen table, and the house was waking up around me. I was making tea or coffee for those who wanted it. Fred and James took toasts and quickly drank a cup of tea, heading to their courses at the university. Matt sat and chatted for a while before taking the bus to his sponsor's place of work. Molly hadn't shown up yet when Valerie called from the short hallway. Come here, please, Paul said. I followed her voice and found her sitting in Molly's bedroom, holding a sheet from her daughter's footprints. Oh, this is a bad time, I thought. Molly wanted to take a shower when the room was empty. Val went in to get all the family. We conversed for a while before taking the bus to Mr. Spencer's place of work. Molly hadn't arrived yet when Valerie called from the short hallway, Come here, please, Paul. I followed her voice and found her sitting in Molly's bedroom, holding a sheet from her daughter's footprints. Oh, this is a bad time, I thought. Molly wanted to take a shower when the room was empty. Val went in to get all the family bedding for washing. Val patted the bed next to her. We need to talk, Paul. First you and me, then me and Molly, then the three of us need to decide how we're going to tell Pat. Yes, Mrs. Spencer. I replied, blushing harder than a cloudy sunset. I think Mrs. Spencer is a little superfluous now, Paul, isn't it? Valerie or Val is still fine. Molly's mom said, dryly. I sat down. What are your Valerie or Val is still fine? Molly's mom said, dry. I sat down. What are your intentions towards my daughter? Paul, is she just the kind of person you can make love to? If that's the case, if that's all there is, you're no longer welcome in our house. House, Val. I replied, blushing harder than a cloudy sunset. Molly has always been precocious and stubborn. Did you have any feelings for her before last night? If so, you hid them very well. Until yesterday, I had never. Val, I replied, blushing more intensely than a cloudy sunset. Molly has always been precocious and stubborn. Did you have any feelings for her before last night? If so, you hid them very well until yesterday. I had never allowed myself to think of her like that. Molly was the younger sister of my best friend and the youngest daughter in a family that was my only island of sanity in an ocean of nonsense, and I wasn't going to ruin it. Besides, she was too young until yesterday. What has changed? You're going to have to ask Molly about this. If I were going to do something, I would. Paul, I believe you, Val. If you were going to do something, you would have already done it. I permitted myself to ponder Val's perspective. Val, Molly's younger sister and my closest companion, represented my rational anchor in an otherwise chaotic environment. I had no intention of jeopardizing that. However, her age, until recently, was a factor. What has changed? You'll need to inquire with Val about this. If you had committed an error with regard to my daughter, you would have endeavored to rectify it long before this juncture. Was it an act of love? It was making love, wasn't it? It wasn't merely an experiment, it was the most exquisite experience in the world. Val, I replied candidly. Perhaps I didn't fully comprehend my sentiments for Val until last night, but now I am certain. Remain here, Val instructed. I need to confer with Val through the open doorway. I observed that she had just emerged from the bathroom. Molly froze at the sight of me, sitting on her bed, and her mom coming out of the room. Come to my bedroom, Molly. You need to explain something. Molly looked at me guiltily and obediently followed her mother. I waited there for almost an hour before they returned. Well, that's settled, then. Valerie said to both of us, if you're anything like me, you're probably all ready. Molly, you need to explain something. Molly looked at me guiltily, and obediently followed her mother. I waited there for almost an hour before they returned. Well, that's settled then. Valerie said to both of us, if you're anything like me, you're probably already pregnant. Every time your father looked at me, I got pregnant. Did you make sure that Paul is happy about this? Molly, have you thought about what you're going to do for money? Where are you going to live? How are you going to afford food? Paul will have to drop out of university and get a job. Molly, no, Mom, he won't. You're thinking about the short term, but I'm not. Paul will. You're pregnant every time your father looks at me. Have you considered the implications of this situation, Molly? Have you thought about how you're going to manage financially, where you'll live, and how you'll provide for yourself? Paul will have to drop out of university and get a job. No, Mom, he won't. You're thinking about the short term. Paul will finish his studies, and will go to the village. We'll be so happy that they'll have a young teacher and a young family. They'll provide us with a house, and all the other young mothers in the city will help us raise our children. You've got it all sorted out, Mom said with an exasperated sigh. How are you going to live until Paul finishes his studies? Pat and I will help in any way we can. We will find a double mattress somewhere, and we will sleep on the floor if necessary. The baby can sleep in my old crib, which you never got rid of, and it's still in the garage. Everything will be fine. We can handle it, and live on opinion. Or do you expect Pat and me to support all three of them? You know how your father feels about Social Security. No, I'm going to work so that. Valerie turned to me. I'm sorry for the abrupt, but you know I'm right. We're going to live here. Mom, Paul. Paul will move in with me, and we'll find a double mattress somewhere to sleep on the floor if necessary. The baby can sleep in my old crib, which you never got rid of and is still in the garage. Everything will be fine. We can handle it and live on opinion. Or do you expect Pat and me to support all three of them? You know how your father feels about Social Security. No, I'm going to work so that Paul can finish his studies, and I will work to support him. You worked until the week you gave birth to Fred, and it's the same with James. You said so. I can do the same. What will you do? I'm not sure what I can achieve by doing everything necessary. We'll do it, Mom, with or without your help. What about you, Paul? What do you think of everything Molly said? Ask Val. I think you're right, Val. If Molly and I are going to get Paul, I understand that you're concerned about your future career prospects. However, I'm confident that with the right approach, we can navigate these challenges and achieve our goals. Molly, your insights are invaluable. I appreciate your perspective on our family's future. Val, I agree with your assessment of the situation. If we're going to have children and establish a family, it's essential that I secure a stable job. Paul, I'm committed to fulfilling my duties and achieving long-term career stability. I recognize the importance of making the right decisions now, such as leaving university to seek employment, which is the most immediate option. I'm also open to exploring long-term goals, such as pursuing a teaching qualification, as it could provide valuable skills and experience. I am a grown woman with a family. I need to find a job. Unlike my father, I will never leave Molly and my child. I am here for the long term, which means that I need to muster the courage to fulfill my duties and find a stable, paid job. I also think Molly is right. Val muttered, leaving university and getting a job is the right decision in the short term. Getting a teaching qualification is the best long-term planning. We're going to have to try and figure out how we're going to get you through this course. Molly wrapped her arms around her mother's neck. See, if you just listen, everything will be fine. You're assuming that your father won't kick both of you when he finds out that you made love before the wedding. He's not going to, is he? Molly informed her mother that her father might be upset, but he loves her too much to do that. Val suggested that they keep quiet about Paul and her until she could confirm her pregnancy. She wanted to surprise her father so he would allow her to marry Paul. I'm pregnant. Marrying Paul won't be a problem. Molly, Pat will demand that Paul marry you, and that's how it worked. I do not know if Molly got pregnant that first night, but a pregnancy test confirmed that Molly is pregnant after that first awkward night. We did it pretty well. Molly loved to experiment, so we tried. After the first night, during which a pregnancy test confirmed that Molly was pregnant, we proceeded with caution. Molly, being adventurous, explored various options. 21 days after our first encounter, Molly invited me to her bedroom and revealed the results of her pregnancy test, 2 blue lines, indicating her pregnancy. We informed Val first when she returned home. Okay, now the challenging part begins, informing your father. Let's hope he's in a good mood today, Molly. Molly and I sat on the couch, holding hands, and waited for Pat to return home. Pat reacted surprisingly well to the news that Molly and I were now an item. Matt managed the situation well from the start, but I was surprised at how happy Fred and James were. Molly was beaming, and I'd never seen her so happy. Paul James told me, just don't. I sat with Molly on the couch, waiting for Pat to return home. Pat's reaction was surprisingly well managed. Matt was composed from the beginning, but I was surprised by the joy that Fred and James were displaying. Molly was radiant, and I've never seen her so content. Paul James advised me, do not cause her distress, otherwise, you and I will encounter difficulties. I assured him that I wouldn't. I wish you both well, Fred said. I believe you'll be a compatible couple, but if you cause her distress, do you understand? I replied, I'm uncertain how they would react when they learned that Molly was pregnant from me. I thought it would depend on. I'm not planning on breaking her heart, but I'm not going to let her down either. I'm sure you understand. I know. I'm not sure how they'll react when they find out that Molly got pregnant from me. I thought it would depend on how Pat handled it. A lot depends on how well Molly has fooled Pat. Val, Molly, and I were surprised when Pat was completely calm when we told him that Molly was pregnant. Pat took a couple of deep breaths, and then he turned to me. That's why you asked me if you could date Molly. Paul, isn't that right? Yes, sir. Pat's demeanor was composed as he inquired about Molly's pregnancy. He took a few deep breaths and addressed me, is it true you're considering a romantic relationship with Molly? I replied, yes, sir. Are you planning to marry my daughter? He responded, Molly is of age, and I understand you're aware of that. However, we'd like your consent. If you're not willing to give it, we'll be disappointed, especially Molly. But we'll still proceed with the marriage. I would like to hear Paul's perspective on this matter. Do you love my daughter? Yes, Pat. I believe it has always been that way, but I chose not to allow myself to believe it because she was too young. That I give you my permission and my blessing. Once you are married, you are welcome to move into Molly's bedroom with her. I take it you are. I would like to discuss the possibility of Paul and Pat moving in together after he graduates from university. I understand that this may not be ideal, but I believe it is the best course of action. If this is agreeable, I will of course provide support and resources. Regarding the matter of Molly's education, I believe it would be in her best interest to continue her studies. I am willing to provide financial support for her education, and I am confident that with dedication, she can achieve her goals. Molly, I understand that you have concerns about the feasibility of the proposed plan. I would like to reassure you that I am committed to achieving a degree, and I am confident that with our collaboration, we can overcome any challenges. Molly, I have decided to withdraw from my current course to seek a more suitable opportunity. I recognize that the Women's Studies course may not align with my career aspirations, and I am exploring alternative options that better reflect my professional goals. Pat, I understand your concerns about the timing of the pregnancy, and I assure you that I am prepared for this change. I am committed to ensuring that Paul can contribute financially during this period, and I am confident that we can navigate these challenges together. During the holiday season, and by the time he has to return to university, I will be ready to resume my professional activities. My mother is not currently employed, she will be responsible for childcare while I am at work, and Paul is studying at the university during the remainder of the time. Either Paul or I will be at home. If only life were that simple. Molly expressed her displeasure, but that is precisely how the arrangement worked. Molly gave birth to our first child a week after the I will be ready to return to work once the holidays are over and my child is in school. My wife is not currently employed, she will be taking care of our child while I am at work and Paul is studying at the university. The rest of the time, either Paul or I will be at home. Life is not always simple, though. Molly had our first child a week after the end of the academic year at the university. She worked until the night before Patrick was born. That evening, when she finished her shift at supermarket, she said goodbye to everyone. "Where are you going?" they asked. "I'm having my first baby tomorrow," she replied, showing them her large stomach. They all laughed, and the older women told her that it didn't happen that way, but it worked. Patrick was born at 10:57 a.m. The following day, everyone except Molly, of course, called Patrick. I don't think he was like his grandfather, Patrick, but it seemed to fit with the fact that we all lived together during the first 3 years. Our second child, Tommy, was born almost exactly 1 year after Patrick. I suspected that Molly was expecting him on the same day, but she didn't have enough time. Robert, or Robbie, as everyone called him, appeared 14 months later. By that time, I had already received my degree, as Molly decided we moved to Ayala, where I took up as part of the agreement, the position included housing in the school building. Consequently, Molly, the boys, and I obtained our own residence. Pat and Val visited us as frequently as their schedule allowed, and during school holidays, we returned to them. Molly and I have been attempting to conceive a fourth child, but have not yet been successful. Almost 2 years later, Molly announced that she was pregnant again, and the child was expected to be a girl. Unfortunately, doctors identified an abnormal growth in Molly's right kidney. Further tests were performed. The specialist confirmed that the growth was malignant and extremely virulent. It had already spread through Molly's liver and into her left lung. The only course of action to save Molly was to terminate the pregnancy and undergo intensive chemotherapy. I was torn. If we don't act now and start immediate treatment, we're going to lose the baby. Unfortunately, given how fast this cancer is spreading without chemotherapy, your chances of surviving and giving birth are almost zero. "You obviously don't know me," Molly informed me. The specialist informed us that the patient's cancer was spreading rapidly and that the likelihood of survival without chemotherapy was extremely low. He recommended immediate treatment to save the patient's life. Molly stood up and grabbed my arm, saying, "Come on, Paul. We're leaving." She pulled me out of the seat and dragged me to our car. "I will live to see the birth of our daughter and calm down. Don't grieve because I promise that we will be together again. Now, tell me that you believe me." With a nod of my head, I said, "I believe you, my love. I still like it. You know my love. It makes me feel like I'm your whole world." Molly gave birth to our daughter in the afternoon sun on Friday. The nurse washed the baby and placed it with Molly. Molly was on oxygen and sedation, the maximum dose that the anesthesiologist was willing to administer without endangering the infant. She looked at her daughter, smiled, and said, "I want you to call her Molly after me. Promise me you'll take care of each other forever." "Paul, promise me that now," she said. "My love, I promise," I told her, and my heart broke into pieces in front of her. Molly was gone. My wife did everything in a hurry. I was born early, lived a hard life, had children early, and died early, long before her. The transition was expected. I escorted the boys and Molly back to Pat and Val. All three brothers relocated, and we were able to take up their former rooms. Mother displayed no interest in meeting any of her grandchildren, so, for my own peace of mind, I allowed her to grieve in private. I maintained composure, not because I desired or even thought I could, but because my children required me. Our eldest was not even 6 years old yet. I mostly maintained composure because I knew that was what Molly desired. Many nights, I repeated in my mind what she had said to me before. She passed away, and it is not necessary to grieve. I assure you that we will be reunited in some form. The way genetics works has always been a mystery to me. All three boys grew up to be as tall as me, yet none of them reached my height. Molly and my two older children are slim, while the youngest, Robbie, is likely to gain weight, as I did not maintain a high level of exercise and a strict diet. MJ looked like her mother, being tiny, with shiny green eyes, dark brown hair, and the same straight, white teeth. She also had full lips. The same mischievous smile, unfortunately, was accompanied by the same tendency to stare. The intensity of her gaze was a little frightening at times. On MJ's 5th birthday, she inquired about enrolling in a gymnastics course. The Olympic Games were last year, and Michael sat glued to the TV throughout the gymnastics competitions. I was able to find a suitable club for her, and it was easy to get her there. MJ was always ready and waiting with all her gear, long before it was time to go to the club. MJ must be very good. She was on the Australian gymnastics team for the 2018 Commonwealth Games and the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, which, as we know, will be held in 2021. She was only 14 years old in 2018, but missing the home Commonwealth Games by such a small margin must have been disappointing. However, MJ took it all calmly. Gymnastics is just an activity while I'm waiting for the right moment. MJ informed me when I asked how she felt about skipping, "Where have I heard this before?" My late wife felt very at that time. My career as a teacher was coming to a close, and I was considering my next steps. I was confident that the rest of my life would unfold in a positive manner. All of the boys have grown up to be well-behaved and upstanding young adults. PJ and Thomas have been trained in the same manner as their grandfather. Pat managed to persuade him to enroll in an electrical engineering course. Tommy aspired to become a plumber, and he was accepted into the program. Pat put in a good word for him. Robbie was a very intelligent individual, so he was currently at that time. My career as an educator was coming to a close, and I was transitioning into the next phase of my professional journey. All of my students have grown into well-adjusted adults. PJ and Thomas have been well-trained, and PJ completed his training on the same board that his grandfather had worked on. Pat managed to persuade him to enroll in an electrical engineering course. Tommy aspired to become a plumber, and he was accepted into the program. Pat spoke on his behalf, and Tommy was accepted as a Q student. Robbie was a highly intelligent individual, so he was currently studying at the University of Melbourne, working towards a degree that would eventually allow him to obtain his MD degree. I was offered the position of director back at my first teacher training school in Adelaide. Initially, I was going to decline because MJ was going to enter the 12th grade, which was probably the most important year of her high school career. MJ told me, "Don't be silly, Dad. You always said you would return because you really liked it there. What better time than now, after you graduate?" After completing my studies at the University of Melbourne and obtaining a degree that subsequently enabled me to secure my MD degree, I was offered the position of director at my first teaching training school in Adelaide. Initially, I was going to decline the offer because MJ was going to enter the 12th grade, which was likely to be the most significant year of her high school career. MJ reassured me, saying, "Dad, you always said you would return because you genuinely enjoyed it there. What better time than now, after you graduate?" I retorted, "Mississippi, I don't want to go to university." MJ informed me that she wanted to settle down with a suitable partner and have children with him. She added, "Adela is an excellent place to raise children, as you all know, so why not there?" I inquired, "What about your gymnastics from here? You won't be able to achieve the necessary level to compete in the 2024 Olympic team." MJ replied, "Gymnastics was just to fill the time. Now that I'm almost finished, I don't need it anymore." By this point, I understood that arguing with MJ was futile. It was as futile as debating with Molly. I exhaled, exasperated. Then, the issue was resolved. MJ informed me that I would secure employment, we would return to Agella, and I would complete high school and locate a suitable spouse. I aspire to the same as my mother, the same as her mother, 3 sons and then a daughter. With my hands raised in triumph, I accessed my email and transmitted a confirmation request, indicating my availability to commence work in the subsequent semester within approximately 4 weeks. Approximately a week after Molly's 18th birthday, I received a notification from her. The transition to life in the United States was challenging. I had never encountered another woman with whom I felt a romantic connection. There were women who appeared to be interested in me, but as soon as they learned that I was raising 4 children with limited financial resources, their interest waned. To be transparent, the issue was that the situation with Molly, MJ, and I was not as ideal as it could have been. We gathered our belongings, which were not many, placed them in a rented trailer, and drove for 8 hours to Ayala. As the principal, I was provided with a larger and more well-equipped residence compared to the teacher. I was pleased to exchange residences with Alex, one of the 4 other high school teachers. Alex was at the house I had when I first arrived. It was a modest residence with 3 bedrooms and 1 toilet and bathroom. Alex and his wife had 4 children. The director's residence has 4 bedrooms, plus a bathroom in the master bedroom. This exchange made sense, considering it was just MJ and me there. This simple action alone has earned me the approval and support of the teaching staff. Molly Jr. Modestly, I was pleased to exchange residences with Alex, one of the 4 other high school teachers. Alex was at the house I had when I first arrived, a modest residence with 3 bedrooms and 1 toilet and bathroom. Alex and his wife had 4 children. The director's residence has 4 bedrooms, plus a bathroom in the master bedroom, so the exchange made sense, considering it was just MJ and me there. This simple action alone has earned me the approval and support of the teaching staff. Molly Jr. modestly celebrated her 18th birthday in Brisbane. She invited some of her closest friends to Pat and Val's for a barbecue and a few drinks. It was a surprisingly quiet affair. There were only 6 of us, plus MJ, Pat, Val, her 2 brothers, Robbie, and me. Only 2 of MJ's guests were boys. Her friends' boyfriends, as far as I know. MJ has never had a boyfriend. Valerie celebrated her 18th birthday in Brisbane with a small gathering at Pat and Val's, including 6 of her closest friends, MJ, and Pat Val. The event was rather subdued, with only 2 of MJ's guests being male. MJ has never been romantically involved, at least to my knowledge. She has never introduced a boyfriend to her family or social circle. Valerie observed the 7 children engaged in lively conversation and activity. She speculated that MJ might have been waiting for something. Val replied, "I believe she turned 18 today. I wonder who this fortunate individual is." Pat nearly choked on his beer. "Do you think you'll have the same conversation with the boy tomorrow morning?" Val muttered, watching the 7 children laughing and dancing together. "I believe she turned 18 today," I replied. "I wonder who this lucky guy is." Pat almost choked on his beer. "Do you think you're going to have the same conversation with the boy tomorrow morning?" he asked. "As you and I have coped, no, but not tomorrow. None of these guys are strong enough to get MJ's attention. It would be great to have children again, and the sound of young feet in the house." Val reflected. It was my turn to choke on my beer as soon as MJ and I settled into our lives in Ayala. MJ's behavior changed. If I didn't know better, I'd say my daughter started. Val reflected on the fact that MJ's behavior had changed since they had settled into their lives in Ayala. If I didn't know better, I'd say her flirting was directed towards me. Fathers do not have such thoughts and ideas about their daughters. It's just not appropriate. However, there were other things. MJ approached me from behind when I was at my desk in the home office, checking papers. On other occasions, MJ came out of the bathroom wearing only a towel. This went on for another 3 months, and it all turned into MJ's flirtatious behavior, which included touching me in ways that were not appropriate for a father or daughter, continued for several months. I initially dismissed these feelings, but they persisted and escalated over time. MJ's actions, which included wearing revealing clothing and performing exercises in the living room, were inappropriate and unprofessional. A recent afternoon found me in the midst of an uncomfortable situation with my daughter. MJ, who was in her late teens, had invited me into her living room to view her exercise programs. As she began to warm up and stretch, I found myself taken aback by the intensity of the exercises. I quickly moved to my bedroom and sat on my bed, feeling a sense of embarrassment for the first time. I was grateful that my late wife was not present, as I would have been worried about her reaction. As night fell, I remained in my bedroom, contemplating the day's events, when MJ knocked on my door and entered. I invited her in. I was overwhelmed, so I rose and went to my bedroom. I sat on the bed for a long time, ashamed for the first time. I was glad that my late wife was not with us yet. I'm sure Molly would disapprove of me as much as I disapprove of her. Night fell, and I was still sitting on the bed, staring into the abyss when MJ knocked on my door. "Come in," I said. "I made dinner," MJ said. She gave me a shaky smile as if she had something to be ashamed of. I stood up and replied, "Sounds good." "MJ, have you finished training for today? There was something else I wanted to show you, but maybe I can save it for another night." I could have sworn that her smile was knowing, but I quickly put the thought aside. I prepared dinner. Dad MJ stated that I had made some Old English sausages. She gave me a slight smile, as if she had something to be ashamed of. I stood up and replied, "That sounds good." "MJ, have you finished training for today? There was something else I wanted to show you, but maybe I can save it for another night." I could have sworn that her smile was knowing, but I quickly dismissed the thought. Val turned 70 the following week. The weekend, everyone was going to be there. All the brothers would be there. Fred was taking his wife and 3 almost grown children with him. James, who was now called Jamie because his fiancée insisted on it, went with her. His 2 children from his first marriage came with him. Matt, who was still living the life of a carefree bachelor, Val's 70th birthday was approaching, and the weekend was set to be a celebration. All of the brothers were expected to attend, along with Fred, who was bringing his wife and 3 adult children. James, now known as Jamie due to his fiancée's insistence, was accompanying his partner, and Matt, who had chosen a life of leisure, was also present. Despite being of the same age as me, Matt was expected to contribute to the festivities. Robbie was flying in from Melbourne, and my other 2 sons were scheduled to attend. With the end of summer approaching, we were planning to stay with Pat and Val. The younger people shared tents on the street, and we gathered several camp beds and mattresses to accommodate everyone. Despite his youth, Robbie was aware of the potential consequences of his actions. He was traveling from Melbourne, and my other 2 sons were expected to attend. It was the end of summer, and we were planning on staying with Pat and Val. The young people shared tents on the street, and we gathered several camp beds and mattresses to place them under the porch and in the garage. The event promised to be crowded, noisy, and highly enjoyable. I was eagerly anticipating the occasion. Fred's wife, Marcy, was a skilled cook, and her culinary expertise was highly regarded by all the members of the large Pat and Val family. Marcy offered to assist with most of the cooking, allowing Val to be relieved of her kitchen duties on her birthday. The week before Friday, when we were heading to Brisbane, was excruciating. Every time I turned around, I found MJ smiling at me. How could this be? MJ only met her mom briefly on her birthday. How could she do something that her mother knew would ensure that I would stop whatever I was doing and take her to bed? MJ said dreamily, "I love you, Polly boy." I jumped. The week leading up to Friday, when we were scheduled to travel to Brisbane, was exceedingly difficult. I repeatedly found MJ smiling at me and looking in my direction. How was this possible? MJ had only met her mother briefly on her birthday. How could she do something that her mother knew would compel me to stop whatever I was doing and take her to bed? MJ said dreamily, "I love you, Polly boy." I jumped to my feet in complete shock, dropping MJ to the floor. MJ looked at me, suddenly a little scared. "How do you know that name?" I begged, almost in tears. "Your mom only called me that on special occasions." Clearly confused, Molly said, "Did Mom call you Daddy dear on special occasions?" "No, you just called me Polly boy." "I think you need to check your hearing, Dad." "Daddy dear, why? Do you think I'm so shocked that you've gone crazy?" I started crying that I miss your mom so much, you know, sometimes I feel like she's here with us that it's almost as if I could turn my head quickly enough and see her. Other times, especially when I'm thinking of doing something stupid or dangerous, it's like she's warning me and guiding me to a better choice. I'm not entirely convinced that you're not simply experiencing a bout of emotional distress. I began to shed tears. I miss your mother dearly, as you are aware. Occasionally, I feel as though she is present among us. It is as if I could turn my head quickly enough and see her. At other times, especially when I am contemplating taking a risk or engaging in dangerous behavior, it seems as though she is cautioning me and guiding me towards more prudent choices. You have never voiced any discontent to me regarding the absence of your mother, MJ. Why not? Because I grew up safe in your love, Dad. If Mom were here, it would be better, of course. It would be, but you have done exceptionally well with the four of us. Pat and Val were involved as well, MJ. Yes, but much of what we have all become has been due to your resilience, security, and the freedom to be ourselves that you have provided. Given your resilience, security, and the freedom to be ourselves that you have given us, I have never had a real boyfriend. Sometimes I nodded because they don't stand up to you, Dad. I haven't met a boy or a man yet, for that matter. It's even half of what you are, but rest assured, as soon as I meet him, I'm going to marry him and have his children. It's getting late. MJ said I'm going to sleep in bed with you tonight because I don't think. I'm curious as to why I've never had a serious romantic partner. Sometimes I nodded in agreement. They don't stand up to you, Dad. I haven't met a boy or a man yet, for that matter. It's even half of what you are, but rest assured, as soon as I meet him, I'm going to marry him and have his children. It's getting late. MJ said I'm going to sleep in bed with you tonight because I don't think you should be alone. You can sleep under the blanket, and I'll take the blanket and fall asleep under it, okay? Molly used that tone all the time. It was framed as a question, but it's not even. If I had said no to MJ, I would have woken up and found her sleeping where she said she was. MJ rolled her eyes and went to get a blanket. I lay awake for a very long time. It was already 3 o'clock in the morning when I finally dozed off and immediately began to dream. It was as if I was floating in an endless white cloud, drifting happily. I heard a voice calling me, "Polly, Polly, I'm here. Where are you?" I would have recognized that voice underwater and behind a concrete wall, approaching Molly's voice. The clouds parted, and I looked at my wife on the hilltop under the rays of the late summer sun. Molly hasn't changed a bit since we were together. It was my Molly, looking as beautiful as she during our initial evening of romantic engagement. I embraced her in my arms. The experience was so authentic that I could sense her presence. I miss you profoundly, my love. I informed her that I am unable to continue this way. It is exceedingly difficult for me without you. I still cherish the way you address me as Polly. Our opportunity to reunite will arise, but not at this juncture. It is essential for you to witness the boy's full maturation and the nuptials of MJ and the meeting of her first child before you can consider such a prospect. I would like to object, but it was Molly. I could never refuse her. I nodded in agreement. I understand, if that is the way it should be, then I will proceed. Molly smiled at me, her beautiful smile lighting up the room. I recognized that I was dreaming, yet the scene seemed strikingly real, particularly when Molly cast that expression. I woke up again early. The sun rose, illuminating the room with a soft light. MJ was still sleeping on her side, a little away from me, so I could slip out of bed without waking her. I stood and gazed at my beautiful daughter. She looked so sweet and innocent, and my heart was filled. On the occasion of Val's birthday, a gentle breeze blew through the open window, parting the curtains momentarily. As Val's birthday was on Friday night, those of us who were already there had dinner together. Marcy was the culinary guest of honor. Val's party took place the next evening, when everyone who could attend arrived. It was a jubilant event, with a generous selection of alcohol and an abundance of food, laughter, and jokes. Pat and Val invited all their immediate neighbors to celebrate with them, so there were no complaints about noise or on the occasion of Val's birthday. A gathering was held on Friday evening, during which dinner was served. Marcy was responsible for the meal. The following evening, Val's party took place, and all invited guests were present. The event was well attended, with an abundance of food, laughter, and jokes. Pat and Val invited all their immediate neighbors to join the celebration, which led to a peaceful gathering with no reported noise or other neighborhood issues. As the festivities wound down, Val's grandchildren invited her to a planned breakfast the following morning. Pat gathered the rest of the family and went fishing. Neither Molly Jr. nor I were interested in fishing, so we remained at Pat and Val's house. "Aren't you going to have breakfast with Val?" I inquired. "No," MJ replied. "I'll take Grandma to lunch another time. I just needed a break from the noise now that we're used to it. To just you and me, it's excessive, wouldn't you agree?" MJ replied. "I consumed a bit too much last night and experienced some queasiness and a headache. I'm planning to take a nap," MJ informed her. "Will you be alone for a while?" "Indeed, Dad," MJ replied. "I could exercise to help mitigate the effects of alcohol," I said. "I'll lie down on MJ's old bed," MJ replied. Molly and I realized our love for each other in the same bed. I don't know how long it took before I was woken up by the sound of something breaking. I decided to exercise to overcome my alcohol dependency. I lay down on MJ's old bed and realized our love for each other. I don't know how long it took before I was woken up by the sound of something breaking and coming out of bed. I searched for the cause of the sound and found MJ in the living room. She rolled across the living room floor, but miscalculated the distance, and her right foot crashed into the wall, broke through it, and got stuck. Her head was somehow stuck behind the couch. My daughter was standing on her left leg, her right leg was stretched over her head, and it got stuck in the hole that her kick had formed. Strangely enough, MJ didn't call for help, but just tried to get out, but she got stuck pretty quickly. I was in a position of advantage at that moment, and we engaged in sexual intercourse. I was immediately struck by shame. I had ruined my daughter's life. What if I had made my daughter pregnant? What would Molly do to me if she were alive and found out about this? I thought. I abruptly pushed my foot back, so that MJ fell behind the couch and flew back into the bedroom. I wanted to pray that MJ wouldn't be able to recover in time. The lock on the bathroom door hasn't worked since I was a child, and it stayed that way. Thinking deeply about I was confronted with the challenges of betrayal and the emotional distress of guilt. I was unaware of the occurrence of the bathroom door opening and MJ's subsequent entry into the bathroom. My initial awareness of her presence was when she opened the shower curtain and entered the shower with me. I expressed my surprise, stating, "MJ, what is your purpose in doing this?" She replied, "It's okay, Daddy. MJ said I wanted you to find me. I wanted you to be my first lover. No one I've ever met can compare to this, and I want it to be that way. That's why I pretended to be stuck." "This is wrong, MJ." I responded, "Even if that's what your mother expressed a desire for you to be unaware of her intentions." MJ left me a diary in which she outlined her aspirations and expectations for you. In the diary, she requested that I provide for your needs until the designated time for you to join her. "I love you, MJ. Our actions are regrettably inappropriate, but I am committed to you until your mother contacts me. I love you too, Daddy. Stop worrying. They do not need to concern themselves with information that others do not possess." I located my phone and verified the time. There is still considerable time before everyone returns. Can we complete the task in time? After collecting our clothes and bedding, I ran them through the laundry machine and put them in the dryer when they were dry. I made our bed and carefully examined the room in the living room. I was satisfied with the lack of evidence of wrongdoing. I was finally able to take a nap, which I needed. I woke up to laughter and loud conversations. The whole family is back yawning. I wandered into the outdoor area. The entertainment area was a space where guests were offered refreshments. MJ's role as a presenter ensured the distribution of hot pies and other refreshments, and she ensured that everyone was well hydrated. I observed that she continued to glance at the man PJ had brought home with him. "It's good to see you're back," MJ said, laughing. "Remember Luke from our school days?" I recall a slender guy named Luke who PJ used to socialize with when we all resided here. This individual was a man of stature, with a commanding presence. He was tall, with a prominent beard, deep-set eyes, and a gruff voice. "Hello, Mr. Johnson. It's been a while." "Hello, Luke. Everything's fine with Paul." Luke turned and noticed MJ bending down to retrieve some paper cups that had unintentionally fallen on the grass. Later, I separated Pat and Val from the rest of the group. "Do you recall when Molly turned 18 and I speculated about whether I would be having the same conversation with MJ as you and?" I gestured in the affirmative. I pointed my head in the direction of the hatch the following morning. I believe Pat and Val turned to Luke. Luke was so engrossed in conversing with MJ that he did not notice the attention we were all directing his way. Despite his appearance, Luke works as a civil engineer. There are rumors that he will enter politics in the next election. MJ could have done a lot worse. Pat muttered. Val intervened. However, he is 6 years older than MJ at her age. That is a considerable age. I am 10 years older than her, but we are about the same age in terms of maturity. I replied, "Look at your granddaughter. Do you think he has any chance?" Molly Jr. was standing right in front of Luke and chatting with him. Her eyes were wide open. Luke said that MJ even grinned because of a bad joke. Val shook her head. "No chance." I got up early the next day, and indeed, half of the bed where MJ was lying was empty. Early in the morning, I made myself a cup of tea and sat down at the table, sipping it. Around 6, at midnight, MJ entered the office and greeted me. MJ appeared to be slightly flustered, but attempted to conceal it by saying, "Good morning, Daddy. You're up early today." "MJ, I insist that you tell the truth. I was unable to sleep, so I decided to take a walk and enjoy the sunrise," I replied. "Daddy, you're so lucky," MJ exclaimed. I'm delighted to hear that. It's a wonderful thing to be able to enjoy nature, I replied. How did you know? MJ asked, her voice tinged with surprise. I'm just teasing. Your mom and I have a similar history, I replied, laughing. At midnight, MJ discreetly entered the room. I noticed her presence and asked her how she was doing. She blushed and attempted to conceal her embarrassment by stating that she had been awakened by the desire to see the sunrise. I replied, MJ, I urge you to be honest with me. I bless you and Luke. MJ gasped, and I laughed, acknowledging the similarity in her age to my own when I had experienced similar situations. MJ appeared slightly embarrassed. He's so handsome, Daddy. I intend to marry him and have many children. Perhaps I will have 6 children, 2 more than you and Mom have. Go get your man, MJ. We need to discuss some matters with him. Daddy, you and I were well lovers for a short time, weren't we? No, MJ. I'm not jealous at all. I simply want to see your man. Your mother was your age. MJ looked slightly embarrassed. He is very handsome. Daddy, I will marry him and have many children. Maybe I'll even have 6, 2 more than you and Mom have. Go get your man, MJ. We need to talk to him. Aren't you jealous, Daddy? You and I were lovers for a short time. No, MJ, I'm not jealous at all. I just want to see your man. Be gentle with him, Daddy. He looks like a big, old grizzly bear, but like you, he's a teddy bear inside. MJ admonished me. MJ and Luke got married in the same church as Molly and me. Their first child was born less than a year later. Luke ran for Chatsworth East seat and was elected by a large margin. He and MJ bought a house and settled into family happiness. I was lonely in Ayala. I started applying for a teaching job back in Brisbane, but without success. On the way home from one of my regular trips to see my grandson, I put too much pressure on the gas and couldn't make a nearly straight turn. When my car flew into a ditch, Molly appeared in the seat next to me, ready to go home. Polly, boy, she asked. Yes, my love, I said.